Section 29 of the Soul, or Rational Psychology. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Soul, or Rational Psychology by Emanuel Swedenborg. Translated by Frank Sewall, 1837 to 1915, and others. Section 29. The Love of Good and of Evil. 324. Between the love of the true and the love of the good there is the difference as between intelligence and wisdom. For truths are the objects of the intellect, but goodnesses those of wisdom. But no intellect is without wisdom, because there is none without the love of some good. Intellect is acquired through the love of understanding truths. Wisdom is not acquired, because the good itself is that beloved essence which flows in and insinuates itself of itself. But the intellect is required in order that we may understand whether it be the truly good, or the apparently good, or that which is not good but only a false good. The truly good is in itself good. The apparently good is good in itself so far as it so appears. The false good is evil because contrary to the true good. Thus the true and the good exist both united and separate, since we are able to love the evil and to hate the good. And yet we are gifted with intellect to be able to understand the true and the false, or to understand that a thing is not good although we undertake it. This is called intellective wisdom, scientific and external. Wisdom itself cannot exist without being conjoined with love, and because all love is inborn, we cannot be wise of ourselves, but from the influx of the love of the truly good. And in order that this may flow in, the liberty is given us of inclining our mind to this or that side. Therefore, verities constitute the intellect which is greater in the degree that our principles approach the truths themselves, and free themselves from the shadow of probabilities. In order that our rational mind may be as intelligent as possible, it is necessary that it know universal truths, just as the pure intellectory and the soul know these from themselves, to whose perfections the rational mind strives to approximate. But goodnesses constitute wisdom. To love wisdom is to love the intelligence which reveals the nature of goodnesses, and to love the truly good itself is to be wise. Wherefore our mind always aspires to the highest good, about which there is much dispute, since everyone assumes the probable good to be the highest good. Science is not intelligence nor wisdom, but is the mediate or instrumental cause of intelligence. Wherefore all science is acquired either through one's own experience of the senses, or through the observation and exploration of one's own mind, or by the experience of others. Where there is natural intelligence, there is also science, for one presupposes the other. But science does not then appear as anything contingent, but as a necessity, and because it is natural for it to know this. Science is chiefly concerned with the objects of goodness. Knowledge, cognitio, on the other hand, is the mediate cause whereby science is obtained, whence are doctrines and instructions. Disciplinae. 325. The rational mind never loves the good of itself, but judges concerning the evil and the good. And when it embraces one in preference to the other, it is said to love it, because it admits the one and excludes the other. The mind admits whatever is pleasant, delightful, soothing to the animus and to the senses, or what constitutes the loves of its animus. It causes that these flow into the mind, and when it is occupied with their ideas and expels the contrary, then the mind is said to love because it calls this good. Still, its loves are not properly its own, but flow in. Likewise, when it excludes the affections of its animus, and thus admits the higher loves, then it calls these good, and is said to love these because it is wholly occupied with their idea. Thus the rational mind is possessed by inflowing loves, since it is lacking in its own love. But they are called its own because they flow in and possess its idea. Affirmative and negative. 326. That the mind is able to affirm and deny clearly indicates that it is placed between two loves which influence it in opposite directions, and that it is able to choose the one and reject the other, or that this liberty is the only thing proper to the mind. Without this property the mind could not exist, still less subsist. Throughout the whole body there is nothing else capable of affirming and denying. Our animus cannot do this of itself, because it is affected according to that harmony which is in an object and agrees with its own nature. The eye can neither affirm nor deny, but is affected by the harmony of object and the mixture of colors, among which there is a natural order as in the rainbow. The intellectory itself and the soul cannot affirm or deny, but are gratefully affected by those things which are perfect in themselves, and unpleasantly by imperfect things, always, however, according to the nature of the soul itself. Thus the soul can only love this and hate that, but to affirm and to deny is not in its power, this faculty belonging solely of the rational mind. The truths themselves of the soul are inborn, but its state either loves these truths in themselves or hates them, so that it is impossible to love now what it before hated. But that it assumes this state is possible only in this life, and thus only by means of the rational mind, which is able to affirm and deny, and to choose the one rather than the other. 327. In order, therefore, that there may be in the rational mind a free choice and a will, and thus the faculty of affirming or denying, there are no loves given to it as properly its own. For if it possessed its proper and natural loves, then its affirmative and negative faculty would altogether cease. But that there seem to be innate loves, such as the love of the honorable, the seeds of which seem to be deposited in the mind, and that there are inclinations to this love, this does not prove that these natural loves belong to the mind, but that the mind possesses a disposition only to receive these loves rather than others, to more easily change its states in this direction than otherwise, or to be more easily in these ideas than in others. In a word, that it wishes rather to admit these loves than others. This is nevertheless not a proof that love is inborn and proper to the mind itself. Conscience. 328. A good conscience or a bad conscience seems to be a proper affection of the rational mind, but whether it be so will appear from an examination into its origin. Conscience itself depends primarily on the determination of the truly good. Whatever we believe to be the truly good when we nevertheless act in a manner contrary to it excites a bad conscience, while the opposite course produces a good conscience. Thus our conscience depends upon our principles, which we believe to be so many verities. And so the good conscience of one person may be the bad conscience of another, from one and the same cause. The good conscience of the criminal is the bad conscience of the honorable man. The devil acts against his conscience if he does not do evil, although he knows that this is contrary to spiritual truths. The conscience very plainly declares that our rational mind is midway between the higher and lower loves. A good conscience corresponds to gladness in the animus, and a bad conscience to sadness. Wherefore also gladness and sadness flow by correspondence into the mind and excite its conscience. The states of the soul, also, and its loves contribute much to the state of conscience in the rational mind. The soul which loves truths, when its love reigns in the rational mind, is secretly pained by those things which oppose this love. That is, it is a true conscience. But if the soul hates spiritual truths and becomes diabolical, then the mind is distressed by these truly good things themselves when it is led by them. Therefore, conscience comes from the animus and the superior mind, and is such that hardly any one may know its quality, since in order that any one may judge of the truth of one's conscience, he ought indeed to know what the truly good is, of what quality is the person's mind and his animus. which knowledge belongs to God alone. The conscience itself judges everyone. The highest good and highest truth. 329. This is undoubted, that there is a good in itself, and a principle of this good, that it is principally good itself and love itself. And if there is a good in itself, it is necessary that all those things which flow from that good, and which tend toward that good, be good in themselves. But whatever things tend out of the course, and still more what are contrary to this good, and tend not toward it, these are evil in themselves, and in so far evil as they are removed from that good. Hence it is manifest that nothing but God alone can be the good itself, who is the fount of every good, that is, of every perfect thing. But things evil and imperfect may appear in our minds as good and perfect, and thus persuade us to embrace them. Still, in the purer and more elevated mind, this is not why we embrace things which we acknowledge to be evil, but evil things are embraced because they are soothing and agreeable to the state of our mind. Then also they are sometimes called necessary evils. From this it now appears that every one embraces and calls that the highest good which agrees with the state of his mind. Thus to the revengeful vengeance is the highest good, to the miser wealth, and so with other lusts. In a word, each one places the highest good in a good conscience, but it is to be observed of what sort the good is, whether the truly good or the falsely good. Thus universal truths are to be investigated, and our minds are to be instructed by these. 330. The highest good presupposes also a highest truth, and whatever affirms this highest good is itself the highest truth, and other things are false. But true things are also evil, hence the highest truth means that which expresses the nature itself of anything, what it is in itself, thus both the nature of the good and of the evil. 331. The good in the mind signifies the perfect in nature, wherefore these mutually correspond. Perfections themselves are superior and inferior. Thus the highest good differs in itself or is divided according to the subjects themselves which admit that good. The highest good of the body is the pleasure which most affects the body. The highest good of the animus is that love which most affects it. These goods are in themselves supremely good in respect to the state of the body and of the animus, which receive and are affected by them. Similar is the case with the mind, the soul, and the pure intellectory. The highest good of the rational mind is that which it most joyfully admits and chiefly indulges, or to which its ideas or changes of state incline. All these things are highest goods in themselves so far as they tend to the highest good in itself, and regard this, that is, so far as they are in connection, or united by love, with the highest good. 332. Every faculty and mind, whether superior, inferior, or mediate, aspires to the highest good from an implanted love. Nevertheless, it can never arrive at that degree of good in which is the superior mind, since there is something of the infinite in the superior mind, to which the inferior mind can never attain unless by being itself dissolved or destroyed. The highest of the lower mind can hardly be called the least of the higher mind. We can thus see that our rational mind is unable to think what will be the happiness or the unhappiness of its soul. And if it cannot think this, neither can it express it. The same is true of the highest truths. Our mind may progress indefinitely and diffuse its intellect, and yet never arrive at pure truth such as is in the soul, unless it be dissolved and destroyed. Thus we cannot penetrate into the nature of the pure intelligence or the intelligence of the soul. A limit is accordingly placed to the advancement of our intellect, or beyond which it cannot go. But still there is given to it a field that it may be extended indefinitely, and the love to so extend itself is naturally in it. But if it wishes to be elevated above itself, or to attain to things higher than itself, then it either perishes and is dissolved, or else it is reduced into such a state that it can never again emulate such a condition. and so it sins against the love and the law of order. Still such a love as this is innate in our minds, and we receive it, as it were hereditarily, from Adam. In a word, all that which is good and true in itself is divine. All that which is evil and false in itself is diabolical. All that which is good and true in appearance and semblance is human. Thus the just, the sincere, the honorable, virtue, etc., etc. The love of virtues and of vices, the honorable, the decorous. 333. The honorable is the common quality of all virtues, for all the virtues taken together constitute the honorable. Thus the honorable is the form whose essential determinations are the virtues in particular. Each virtue is a form whose essential determinations are the parts of that virtue, but decorum is the external form of the virtues. For that the virtues may appear, an external is required from which we may judge regarding the honorable in it and its parts. This is why the decorous can be varied in so many ways. Every form may be varied externally in 1,000 ways, and also the states of the internal form may be varied, the external form remaining. This is our political art, to persuade regarding internal things those minds which judge from external things. 334. The dishonorable, on the contrary, is a form whose essential determinations are vices, and every vice is a form whose essential determinations are parts of that vice. The indecorous is the external form, for every internal form has its external form, which is called the figure, and which corresponds naturally to the internal form. 335. There is nothing which is a virtue in itself except the good in itself. But in order that virtue may exist and pass for such, there must precede an affirmative and negative, a rational intuition that the good is to be chosen. There must be a will and an end which we regard as good. These faculties are not formed except in the rational mind. Hence no moral virtue proceeds from other than the rational mind. If an inanimate machine should extend money to some poor person, it could not be called a virtue. If any one benefits another without knowing what he does, or from an opposite intention, or of necessity, this is not called a virtue. If an insane man renders service to society, this is not a virtue, but a good. Therefore, whatever is natural and necessary loses the name of virtue. Thus all virtues are of the mind only. Likewise in respect to vices. There is no vice which in itself is vice. Only the evil is evil in itself. The mind itself is what causes that the morally vicious exists. Thus all morality, like all vice, is of the rational mind alone. 336. What accordingly the virtues are and what are vices I have set forth above. When treating of the affections of the animus, for instance, of ambition, love of self, love of country, revenge, anger, avarice, and other traits. All these are either goods or evils in themselves, but still they are not called virtues or vices except so far as they proceed from the rational mind. Accordingly, as the mind is the more instructed and the intellect greater, the greater is the virtue or the vice which flows thence. Thus, the love of self above all others is an evil in itself, and if such be in the mind, it is a vice. While the love of the many or of society above self is good in itself, but is not called a virtue except in the rational mind. Virtue accordingly depends upon the state of the rational mind, so far as this regards the good which is the real good, or the not truly good which is the evil. When the mind does not know whether it be truly good or the truly evil, it is held in suspense and its conscience is said to be doubtful. In this state it ought to do nothing, because such action would be neither good nor bad, and thus not rational, but brutal and irrational, or like that of an inanimate machine. Therefore, as the mind judges concerning goods, so it judges concerning virtues and vices. 337. It is therefore the rational mind which qualifies all those affections which are ascribed to the animus and to the body. These are all what they are by virtue of their proceeding from the rational mind. Wherefore it is unnecessary to treat of them particularly here, since they all insinuate themselves into the loves and goods of the rational mind, and this by its will determines them into act. This is the reason why nothing which flows into the rational mind, but only that which flows from it, can be called a virtue or a vice. And the greater a virtue is, the more does that which flows in under the form of good persuade the mind that it is such a virtue, when nevertheless it may be a vice. 338. The question now arises whether any love of virtue or of vices belongs naturally to the rational mind. It is proved by experience that the seeds of honor are sown in the minds of some, or that there are inclinations to what is honorable, and so the reverse. But whatever there is from nature in any mind, which without cultivation is no mind, or which must be formed in order to be rational, and which possesses nothing from itself or nothing but that which is acquired, it would seem that the love of virtues is not a love proper to the rational mind, but rather that it belongs to the superior mind, which flows in and constitutes this its nature. This takes place if the love of good flows in, and this good is called virtue when the mind rationally observes that it agrees with the nature of good. Thus we cannot say that the love of virtue is proper to the rational mind, but that the soul from which that love flows is good, or also that the mind is naturally such that it inclines to receive these rather than other loves. Thus its inclination is only a faculty of bending itself to the reception of this or that love. 339. But insofar as the rational mind applies itself to either side, it is also receptive of the truly good and of its love, and it becomes conscious of this good, and from this love flowing in, it wishes and desires its actual attainment. So far, therefore, the love of virtues and of vices may be predicated of the rational mind, for by this faculty it appropriates to itself as its own these goods or evils. End of section 29.